There comes a moment when you realize not everyone deserves a place in your life. Not out of arrogance, but because you've worked too hard for your peace to give it away freely. You've weathered storms alone and mended your own wounds. Now, finally, standing firm. Some people still try to drag you back into the chaos they refuse to leave behind. Toxic individuals don't always appear dangerous. They can arrive with a smile or say all the right things, but you can always feel them draining your energy and unsettling your thoughts, leaving you to question your own worth after every interaction. You begin to understand that protecting your peace doesn't need a dramatic announcement, just a quiet decision. I'm no longer available for this. The Stoics didn't seek revenge, they sought clarity. Through that clarity, they discovered freedom, not from others, but from the compulsion to be pulled into every passing storm. If this kind of stillness resonates with you, consider subscribing. It helps this message find others who are ready to choose depth over noise, and it's a quiet way of saying, this is the life I'm choosing now. Your response is your power. Have you ever considered how much of your life is defined by how you respond? Every unanswered text, every avoided argument, every one more chance you gave someone at all, adds up. It takes a toll, not just on your time, but on your energy, your identity, and the subtle erosion of your emotional foundation. Toxic people don't always bring dramatic chaos. Often, they arrive quietly with a more dangerous tool, bait. It might look like concern, sound like love, or feel like obligation, but it's bait all the same. The moment you react with anger, defensiveness, or a lengthy message explaining yourself, you've already given them what they wanted: your attention, your peace, your center. They aren't after a solution, they're after control. The hard truth is, they will keep playing the same game with different words as long as you keep showing up to play. The Stoics understood this long before we had terms like emotional boundaries or detachment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In essence, your response is your domain. That is where your power lies. It's not about being passive, it's about being precise. It's about understanding that every time you react to something unworthy of your energy, you are voting against your own peace. You are allowing someone else to dictate your feelings, your thoughts, and how much space they occupy in your mind. If they didn't earn that place with trust, respect, or kindness, why are they living there rent-free? Sometimes, silence is more powerful than any comeback, not a cold, dismissive silence, but a grounded one that says, "This doesn't deserve my energy." The decision to say nothing, to walk away, to not attend every argument you're invited to, isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of maturity. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." While that's true, it doesn't mean we have to stay in the irritation. We can learn and still leave. We can reflect and still walk away. And leaving doesn't always mean slamming a door. Sometimes, it's quieter than that: a shift in presence. A subtle withdrawal. The moment you stop justifying your worth, you begin to live from it. That's where the real transformation begins. You start to respond less and reflect more. You become less focused on fixing other people's discomfort and more committed to preserving your own stillness. People who thrive on reaction can't stand stillness. It unnerves them. They rely on emotional confusion to maintain control. But the moment you stop giving them your fire, they have nothing to burn. You stop feeding the dysfunction, and they feel that absence like a door, gently but firmly closing. There is a profound freedom in no longer needing to be understood by the wrong people, a quiet strength in no longer performing emotional labor for those who never reciprocated. Socrates taught through silence, listening more than speaking, knowing when words build and when they destroy. When you begin to practice this restraint, something within you changes. Your energy becomes more centered, your relationships more intentional. You begin to notice which conversations drain you and which people bring unease instead of peace. Most importantly, you start to see how much of your suffering was rooted in trying to be heard by people who were never listening. This is where philosophy meets practice, not in books, but in daily choices. In that one moment when you decide, I don't need to respond to this, and you don't. You go for a walk instead. You focus on your craft. You speak with someone who lifts you up instead of tearing you down. You choose clarity over conflict. That one moment seems small, but it builds into something profound. As Plato said, the first and best victory is to conquer self. And what greater victory is there than winning back your own mind? The more you practice, the easier it becomes. You learn to master the pause, to delay the reaction. Eventually, you no longer crave the last word because you've found something better, inner calm. From that place, even when someone tries to shake you, you don't move, not because you're frozen, but because you've learned to stay rooted. Boundaries begin to set themselves, not as walls of bitterness, but as lines of clarity. You don't have to explain them, you just live them. And the people who truly care will feel the shift, not as rejection, but as refinement. Ultimately, it's not about pushing people away. It's about choosing who gets to stay close. Who gets your softness, your time, your attention. That's your currency. When you spend it wisely, your life begins to reflect that same discipline. You don't have to respond to every invitation into chaos. You don't have to correct every misunderstanding, and you definitely don't have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Hold your silence, guard your peace, withdraw with grace. Let the storm pass while you remain still, because the real power was never in your reaction. It was in your ability to walk away and still remain whole. We are often conditioned to believe that strength is loud, that if someone disrespects you, the only way to protect your pride is to react, to defend, to outsmart or outshout them. For a while, that might feel like power. It might give you a short rush, a sense of being in control, but it's a trap. When your peace depends on winning arguments, you're still giving someone else control. They set the rules, you just play. The more you play, the more exhausted you become. Eventually, you lose track of what you're even fighting for. What if true strength is the refusal to be moved? Imagine someone trying to push your buttons, expecting you to explode as you always have. But this time, you don't. You notice the attempt. You feel the tension rise, but you pause. You breathe. You don't flinch. You don't bite. And that moment of stillness, that choice to remain calm becomes more powerful than any comeback you could ever throw. Without your reaction, their power dissolves. You pull the curtain back on the game and expose it for what it is: dysfunction, insecurity, and control disguised as care. Suddenly, even they can see it, not because you pointed it out, but because your absence of reaction becomes a mirror they can't avoid. Seneca said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." While delay is a powerful tool, the Stoics went further. They didn't just believe in holding back. They believed in letting go. In rising so far above the drama that the chaos couldn't even reach them anymore. That's not avoidance, it's detachment. Detachment isn't about caring less, it's about caring better. It's about protecting your energy so it can serve your growth, not fuel someone else's dysfunction. This is the shift. It's not about cutting people off in a rage. It's about quietly becoming someone they can no longer access. No confrontation. No announcement. Just space clean and intentional. As Carl Jung said, what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. When we fight dysfunction with more dysfunction, we feed it. But when we starve it, when we respond with stillness, it shrinks. It loses its hold. That's what makes detachment so difficult and so powerful. It's not dramatic, it's disciplined. People who once depended on your reaction won't know what to do when you stop giving it. They'll push harder at first, get louder, more dramatic, but that's just noiser. Desperate attempt to regain control. The truth is, they don't miss you. They miss your reaction. They miss the emotional energy you used to pour into the fight. And when they realize it's gone for good, that's when you truly reclaim your power. Plato wrote, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." This includes the power he holds over his emotions, his boundaries, his peace. And that kind of power doesn't shout, it doesn't plead, it stands still, it watches, and it knows that not all storms are worth walking into. You aren't required to justify your peace. You don't owe anyone access just because they demand it. The moment you realize this, your entire posture shifts. You stop explaining your silence. You stop apologizing for choosing calm over chaos. You become someone who doesn't flinch when poked and doesn't entertain battles that only leave scars. This isn't about being passive. It's the opposite. It means you act with intention. You choose where your energy goes. Aristotle taught that virtue lies in balance, not in excess, not in deficiency, but in moderation. That includes emotional energy. Too much reaction, and you become a puppet. Too little engagement, and you disappear. But just enough presence, just enough space, and stillness, and you become something far more powerful than reactive. You become composed. Socrates believed the only true wisdom is knowing you know nothing. In conflict, this is especially true. You don't need to prove your intelligence. You don't need to win every point. Sometimes, wisdom is stepping back and letting others unravel their own arguments while you protect your mind from the wreckage. This way of being isn't easy. It takes practice. But every time you choose silence over sarcasm, breath over blame, patience over provocation, you reinforce that you are no longer available for emotional games. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Eventually, people stop inviting you to those games. They sense the change, and even if they don't like it, they respect it, because nothing is more unsettling to someone who thrives on drama than a person who refuses to react. So keep your peace sacred. Don't trade it for temporary validation. Don't give it away to people who treat it carelessly. Let them talk. Let them spin their stories. You're no longer playing. You're protecting, growing, and most of all, you're free. The strength. In saying no, why do we feel guilty for protecting our peace? Why does saying no often come with an apology? Somewhere along the way, we were taught that setting a boundary makes us difficult, that distance is a punishment, and that silence is cruelty. So we we soften our tone. We wrap our truth in layers of disclaimers just to make it more acceptable to people who never asked how we felt in the first place. But the Stoic doesn't argue with misunderstanding. They don't chase validation or contort themselves to be palatable. Instead, they step back, not with anger, but with clarity. When you begin to understand the value of your own peace, you stop offering it up so freely. You realize that preserving your well-being doesn't make you selfish, it makes you self-aware. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." And part of knowing yourself is learning when your boundaries have been crossed, even subtly, even when no one else seems to notice. It's when someone jokes at your expense one too many times, or expects your time, energy, and attention without ever asking what it costs you. And still, you stay silent, trying to avoid being labeled as cold, rude, or dramatic. But here's the truth. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out, they're doors to let the right ones in. A firm boundary, quietly enforced, is louder than any confrontation. When you no longer feel the need to defend your limits, you carry yourself differently. You don't announce your absence. You just stop showing up where your presence was never honored. Carl Jung believed, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and who you truly are can't be found in constant explaining, apologizing, or shrinking. It's found in the quiet decisions you make to say less, to walk away sooner, to value peace over performance. There's strength in that silence, not the kind that avoids conflict out of fear, but the kind that chooses not to waste energy on battles that lead nowhere. This is what unsettles toxic people the most. They don't get the reaction. They don't get closure. They don't get the emotional feedback loop they've come to expect because you've stopped playing a role in their story. You've turned inward. You've fortified your mind. You've stopped waiting for someone to understand your worth and started living like it was already understood. That kind of shift is subtle but powerful. People begin to notice, even if they can't quite name what's different. Maybe you don't text back immediately. Maybe you don't respond at all. Maybe you stop offering explanations for your silence. And what they don't realize is, your silence isn't an absence of care. It's the presence of self-respect. The power of stillness. Sometimes the most powerful thing you'll ever do is leave quietly. No big speech, no final blow-up, no need for a dramatic goodbye, just absence. That kind of exit doesn't make noise, but it echoes. Presence can be manipulated, argued with, gaslit, and twisted. But absence is different. Absence is undeniable. It's a mirror that forces people to face the space you once filled. People who depended on your reaction, who fed off your apologies, your explanations, your constant effort to keep the peace, will feel your absence. Not when you raise your voice, not when you send that long message, but when you go quiet. When the energy they used to pull from you suddenly dries up, that's when your worth becomes visible. Even to the ones who never truly saw it, it's not coldness. It's clarity. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That still holds true, because walking away with grace, instead of trying to match someone's chaos, isn't weakness, it's evolution. It means you're no longer trying to win a battle that leaves both sides bleeding. You're not mirroring the dysfunction. You're simply removing yourself from the game. This doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It does. Leaving quietly can feel like swallowing your pride or letting go without closure. But what you gain in return is something far more valuable: self-respect, stillness, and space to heal in peace without someone pulling you back into old roles you've outgrown. Carl Jung said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." When you leave with composure instead of chaos, your actions speak volumes. They say, "I no longer live at the mercy of your approval." They say, "This version of me, the one that explained, that stayed too long, that tolerated the disrespect, no longer exists." Many people treat you based on how you treat yourself. When you stay in places that drain you and explain your worth as if it's up for debate, you silently teach others that your peace is negotiable. But when you leave quietly, you reclaim control not over them, but over yourself. There's a moment when silence becomes sacred, when it stops feeling like avoidance and starts to feel like wisdom. When you no longer need to defend your worth in conversations that only ever left you doubting it. When you stop chasing closure from people who were never willing to offer it. That's the moment something inside you shifts. Not out of bitterness, but because you've finally seen the cost of constantly trying to explain yourself to those who never listened. You step into what the Stoics knew all along. Peace doesn't come from getting the last word. It comes from realizing you don't need to speak at all. You stop performing. You stop reacting. You stop proving, not because you've given up, but because you've grown tired of bleeding energy for people who feed off your discomfort. There is strength in that stillness, and not everyone can handle it. Do you know what toxic people hate most? They hate when they no longer get to decide who you are. They hate when their chaos doesn't pull you in like it used to. When their words no longer land, when their silence no longer scares you. Because you're no longer the passenger. You are steering the ship. Your stillness unsettles them. Your peace confuses them. Your composure becomes your loudest response. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And becoming who you truly are often requires letting go of the need to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. It means accepting that some people only loved the version of you that didn't have boundaries, the version of you who said yes when you were tired, who explained your pain until your throat burned, who bent just enough to stay likable even as it broke you. But composure changes that. It says without words, "I'm no longer interested in performing for people who only clap when I'm suffering," and it doesn't need a spotlight. It doesn't need a dramatic exit. The change is energetic, it's internal. Your presence begins to feel different, calmer, clearer. People can feel it, and even if they can't name it, they know something has shifted. You're not reactive anymore. You're intentional. You begin to see how often you've drained yourself just trying to be heard. How many times you raised your voice, not out of anger, but desperation. Now, you see that the ones who care don't need convincing, and the ones who don't will never be convinced. That realization frees something inside of you. It lifts the burden, and in that space, something softer takes root. Self-respect, Socrates said. To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom, and knowing yourself means knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. When to engage and when to walk away, when to fight for a connection and when to stop watering a dead plant. It's a calm awareness that rises above reaction, not because you don't feel deeply, but because you've learned not every feeling needs to be shared with those who weaponize them. Your silence becomes a form of emotional discipline, not the cold, distant kind, but the powerful, deliberate kind. The kind that protects your peace like a sacred flame, because you've learned how easy it is to lose yourself in the noise of someone else's chaos. How quickly you can be pulled into their storm, even after you've done the work to find your own calm. That's the gift of composure. It doesn't erase your emotions, it respects them. It allows you to carry your dignity into places where others dropped theirs. It keeps you rooted in who you are, not in how others try to define you. And maybe most importantly, it frees you from the exhausting cycle of trying to be chosen by people who never had the capacity to see you clearly. So when that moment comes, when you feel the urge to defend yourself, to fight back, to chase one more moment of being understood, pause, take a breath. Let your stillness speak, and let your peace be the answer that no argument can touch. Sometimes, the strongest voice in the room is the one that no longer needs to speak. Thank you for spending these few minutes with me and with yourself. If this message resonated with you, there's another video on your screen that might go even deeper. As always, thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal, where clarity is valued, peace is protected, and growth is lived, not preached.